Hey, how are ya? My name is Thomas, and welcome to my gaming channel, Are We NPC?
We're coming back on the air after an interruption due to technical problems.
Diablo 4's open beta just wrapped up, and my feelings about it are quite mixed following my glowing reception of the game in the early access beta. On one hand, combat and exploration feel well crafted, and the story seems nuanced enough to give the beta version of the game a deeply satisfying ARPG experience. On the other hand, balance, UI, and many general quality of life features feel absent from the game. As of level 25, some may argue that balancing issues this early on aren't indicative of poor endgame feel, and while that may be true in some sense, it is entirely unrelated. How the game feels early on for specific classes is a valid concern that should be balanced. To be clear, I'm not promoting the nerfing of strong classes early on. I'm in support of buffing melee classes to feel as strong as ranged characters, especially because melee classes have to deal with a lot more annoying game mechanics more often, like crowd control and cooldown timers. During my testing of the Barbarian and Druid, which are melee based, they take almost twice the time to clear campaign content or missions compared to their ranged or casting counterparts, at least early game. This is a little disheartening, even if the classes I mentioned do perform better at endgame. In its essence, it could take you close to double the time to reach the same level as a Necromancer or Sorcerer, literally time gating your character experience with ability cooldowns. Mix this with poor movement options on certain builds, and an energy pool that drains rather than replenishes, and very quickly you realize you're being arbitrarily penalized for playing a certain class before you can personally realize its potential. Sure, you could read some guides, pick the meta, and start strong from scratch, but Blizzard is sounding quite contradictory when they say the game is more casual friendly while balancing classes only for endgame. People playing these classes without the guidance of dedicated YouTubers or build guides will be severely disadvantaged, especially since Blizzard will penalize your character account, making it more expensive every time you respec. In my opinion, early levels should serve as a testing period, and in this beta it was. However, you are strongly guided by the legendary affects that drop, and it's starting to feel less like you have the option to use your own free will. No matter what ability I used as Sorcerer, I was steamrolling mobs, completing dungeons in half the time compared to my Barbarian even before getting my first legendary affect. Progression in Diablo 4 when not playing a ranged character feels like an entirely different game. So to those of you saying, wait till endgame, well, that endgame will come much sooner to stronger early game characters, especially when the game doesn't require those characters to be as specialized or gear focused. I think the most glaring contradiction from the game devs result from their stance on respecing your character. Diablo 4 in all aspects is trying to reach a larger casual audience. This is demonstrated through their simplified skill trees, mobile game type UI, and the exclusion of some classic ARPG mainstays like an opaque world map. Diablo is much more an MMO than any of its predecessors. Well, not this one. It's more like Diablo Immortal than any other iteration of the franchise. And with the success, with heavy air quotes, as I absolutely despise that game, we know PvP is going to be a huge part of the endgame and cosmetic grind. The developers themselves have stated there will be PvP-centric gear and PvE-centric gear, so making it more expensive every time you respec means you most likely will have to start building with PvP in mind before you ever get to grind for PvP gear. How does one play the game and progress through PvE while minimizing the amount of respecking needed when accessing PvP later in the game? It makes no sense that finding a good PvE build early on by way of respecking to your legendary affects will then make it more expensive 20 or 30 levels later. What if PvE becomes boring and you want to focus on PvP? Well, if you need 1 million gold to respec, I guess you'll need to play a few more hours of PvE to grind gold to respec for PvP. Rinse and repeat. It seems like Blizzard is shooting themselves in the foot by having this respec philosophy. Casual players may opt out of PvP, which makes it less enjoyable for both parties. The sweats who want to annihilate newer PvP players who haven't min-maxed builds yet, and newer players trying to test out PvP to decide what works on their own. Make respecking free. I mean entirely free. And avoid the gold inflation through gold exchanges. Allow players to use gold in ways that let them progress laterally, whether that be through exchanging gold for more Purveyor of Curiosity tokens, for more chance at legendary drops, or whether that be through rebalancing of item sell price at vendors and how much gold mobs drop. PvP has an extraction element to it, gathering red seeds by defeating players and mobs in the fields of hatred, and then converting those seeds into dust at conversion stations inside the zone. There is an offensive and defensive way to play PvP in theory. And how does a player find a correct build when they are directly inflating their own cost to respec by experimenting? Legendary affects, love them or hate them, add a sense of experimentation into the game that is undermined by the respecking philosophy that Blizzard has arbitrarily formed. I often changed my entire skill tree to test out a new legendary affect I haven't tried yet, in hopes that it would result in a better build overall. There's a lot of resource sink for something I should be able to try without permanently investing in. There is no scientific paper that Blizzard can point to that says limiting respec is good for player satisfaction. Rather, it seems they've already added an inconvenience to character longevity to force you into a new character to potentially rack up more microtransactions. We already know all currencies are shared between every character you create, so I entirely believe this to be the case. If you hit a difficulty wall with one character, either pay to respec faster, or create a new character that you can then buy resources for through the shop to gain XP faster. This sounds very Blizzard. It's most likely an inconvenience to promote more spending once we have all the in-game currencies available to us. Blizzard have formed an idea about satisfaction through ignoring their player base. So many of the hardcore ARPG YouTubers covering this game share this sentiment. So who is this game for? If it's for casuals, then remove the respec cost. Casuals will make mistakes and want to see all the different abilities the game offers because they look cool. And if it's for hardcore fans, they all hate respec cost as well. So what the hell are you doing, Blizzard? Additionally, balancing issues early on is quite telling of the late game experience for most people, potentially making it hard for players who pick melee classes to be aware of when and why they should play PvP or harder content. Getting steamrolled by a sorcerer or necromancer that is 10 levels under you will be extremely confusing. How does a barbarian or druid know when to move on to different world tiers or PvP content when all other classes will be able to do so earlier due to overall utility? Early game balance is important for all players to feel like they can try out content the moment they gain access to it. It sounds weird for solo players to have to stay in a world tier to farm better items when a ranged class can test their builds in harder content more easily, while also benefiting from a higher experience gain and reward drop. Power inequality will differ exponentially the longer you allow balance to lean one way. I am not an ARPG addict. I love the genre. I've played on December. Meh. Last Epoch. Diablo Immortal for like 3 days until I couldn't stand playing it on the PC port anymore. Lost Ark, and many other top-down action RPGs, MMO or not. While I'm not someone to make in-depth guides, I am someone who knows the genre casually. And I can say as someone who wants to take Diablo 4 more seriously than that, I'm not at all sold at the longevity of their endgame when they can't even balance early game. We have no personal experience with the endgame, and can only form our opinions for feedback given early game feel. I really wish Blizzard would have made every class's specialization available at level 15 during the beta. Even if I couldn't do the mission, just activate the ability, so all classes could have been tested with all their features active. It was a brain-dead decision to exclude these systems from the two classes that feel the most unbalanced. As a short side point, classes also have very different building blocks around ability cooldowns, with some classes that have abilities that don't require mana or don't have a cooldown at all. Well, that's fine. It actually makes that character way more fun to play, but why doesn't every class have this type of ability option? Barbarians chase mobs around, swinging their rage generator every time they enter combat. It's fucking boring, especially when your melee reach is being undermined by the mob's speed. By no degree do I think Diablo 4 is a bad game, but I personally believe it could be much better. You want diversity in the game through which class players choose to main, and at this point, Necromancer and Sorcerer are going to flood the population. I don't think that was entirely the case before this beta. I am very skeptical that Blizzard can iron out this early game balance fast enough for release in June. Players have made a decision in their head already on who they will main, and that will be hard to change without a deep developer update pre-launch. There are many more fine details I could point out in this video. However, I'm not sure if those of you watching want that in greater detail. Things like resource gathering for Nightmare Dungeon access, like what New World did before they made all dungeons free, something I'm predicting Blizzard will monetize through Battle Pass tiers. Let me know if you liked this video, and whether you want me to expand further on my problems with D4. But I can't avoid speculation much more than I already have given our limited beta access. Thank you so much for watching. There will be much more Diablo 4 coverage here on this channel, so give a like and subscribe if you think I deserve it. I am very new to YouTube, and every little bit of your interaction helps a ton. With that said, I'll catch you in the next one.